Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video of Wargaming Miniatures Showcase. Today's video is about the chamber of Mazarbul, the diorama I'm currently working on. Yes, it's Moria again, but I promise that the next project will be above the ground. Although Erebor is tempting, well, we'll see. I did this video again as a slideshow because my camera gear isn't good enough to show you all the details. I found inspiration for this diorama online and in the movies. The battle at Balin's grave is one of my favorite scenes of the Fellowship. I started to design the diorama with a CAD tool. This helps me to figure out if the perspective and dimensions come together the way I want. I exported the data into templates for the hotwire cutter and worked out the individual pieces. Just like the bridge of Khazad-dûm, Mazarbul should have light sources integrated into the diorama. So before I finish any of the details, I incorporate the circuits, switches and wiring for the LEDs below the surface. 4 individual circuits can be turned on and off with a switch. Visible wires and switches would ruin the impression, so I try to hide them somewhere inside the construction. On the front side of the board I have the name Mazarbul written in dwarven roots on 8 square blocks of foam board. 4 of these blocks have hidden switches behind them. When this is finished, you won't be able to tell where the switches are. Each switch controls one of the 4 circuits used to light up the board. The first LEDs will light up some of the cracks in the floor. I painted the cracks black from underneath, as these areas will be hard to reach later. To quote bypaint it, just assemble it to the stage where further assembly will cause problems during painting. The second switch will turn on a spotlight onto Balin's grave itself. This is a tribute to the memorable scene when Gimli kneels in front of the grave of his ancestor. The wires for this LED run over the backside of the wall and will be covered with some putty and structure paint after I finish the detail work. I haven't fixed the LED yet because I want to point it exactly onto the gravestone, and I will have to adjust it when everything is put together. Typically a LED isn't focused on a point but emits light in various angles. To shape the beam to a spotlight, I put a small shrink tube over the LED to block emissions to the sides. When the diorama is finished, the light effect should be something like this. With the last 2 circuits I wanted to achieve something new and spectacular. Glowing red and yellow runes will be placed around the doorway. This effect should be subtle by scattering the light with acrylic glass. I haven't done anything like this before. So generally it's a good thing to do a test piece before wasting lots of time and material for the wrong approach. This is what I used for the test piece. I drilled a 3mm hole into a 5mm board of acrylic glass to mount the LED. Then I cut a dwarven rune from 1mm plastic card and glued it onto the glass surface. I painted the plastic card black with a pen. Then I soldered an appropriate resistor to the LED and attached a connector for easy assembly. Plugging it in, I'm really content with the result. Starting with the doorway, I will show you some of the detail work I've done so far. The frame and the door itself were cut from foam board with a hot wire cutter and a sharp knife. After sketching the lines onto the door, I carved them in and glued on some ornaments made from cardboard. I assembled the piece and primed it black. Carving the dwarven runes into plastic card was much more work than I anticipated. Good thing is that you can sand plastic card decently and glue broken parts back together with regular plastic glue. I used a saw to cut the acrylic glass to an arc and drilled 14 holes into it. The LEDs were wired before I glued them into the glass frame. After priming and painting the plastic card, I put the pieces together to see if everything fits. I will close the smaller gaps with some putty later. On the finished showcase, all the wires will be hidden inside the back wall. I want the runes to glow and slowly fade in and out. For this effect I would need a fancy circuit board with various electronic components. This is not my design, credit goes to HDT. I will put a link in the description for the wiring plan. To be honest, I don't know what this exactly does, but it works. I soldered 3 boards for the LEDs in the cracks and the runes. Each setup will allow the LEDs to fade in and out with a predefined intensity and frequency. I will tune them to different frequencies to prevent the diorama from flashing on and off. With all the electronics in place or prepared, I started with the detail work on the foam board. The column was made from several pieces that I glued together and filled the gaps with putty or structure paint. I find it easier to cut complex pieces into smaller parts. I can work out the details on each one individually and glue them back together rather than to carve up a really large piece with lots of angles and edges. An easy way to add some detail to an empty surface is to build up some depth with cardboard. Cardboard is one of my favorite materials because it's cheap and very versatile. I will give you two examples that I used for the chamber of Mazarbul. I needed some decorations for the side and back wall. As the dwarves would probably carve the stone with high precision, I would need to be as exact with this myself. So I made a template with the CAD tool, printed it onto paper and glued it onto cardboard. After cutting the pieces, I glued them to the sanded foam board with diluted PVA glue. The space behind the grave was a bit empty for my taste, so I figured that a statue would be appropriate for a king's grave. Credit for the design goes to Tom Toulis from Fat Dragon Games. I printed it onto cardboard and made 5 layers with varying details. I glued them together and onto the foam board. Working with cardboard, it is important not to soak it, because it may wrinkle or warp. I cover cardboard with 1 or 2 thin layers of diluted PVA glue to seal it before priming and painting. After applying a coat of structure paint to the western wall, the chamber of Mazarbul looks like this. And that's it for work in progress with the Chamber of Mazarbul showcase. Thanks for joining me. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel or join me on Google+. For questions, please leave a comment below or on my blog. Thanks for watching.